Hey everybody, welcome to the Resistance broadcast. I'm John, that's James. Thank you for joining us on this Monday. We are 2 days away from the debut of the Ahsoka series, and it is an important one for many reasons. One being Dave Filoni's first time as a showrunner. He is in charge of a Star Wars live-action show, and that's a big deal, especially with what these characters mean to him and, of course, what it means to fans, especially people who know Rebels, like Rebels, and people who really love Rebels. Now, Rebels is my favorite Star Wars animated series, but James, it is one of your favorite pieces of Star Wars, period. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal in a lot of ways.
Yes. If this is your first time hearing this from me, I think that Rebels, as a collective of 4 seasons, that story is the best Star Wars story ever told, and that includes the movies. It just hit exactly as it should. Sometimes you watch episodes and you go, this feels a little kiddie. But man, when you finish it all and you think back to the show, you don't think about those random episodes or whatever. It has this big, connected, important story out of all those characters.
It does.
And it has such a significance to the overall timeline too. And it does not feel like they just like took a little pocket and did this. There's really a significant thing there. Similar to the Clone Wars, you know what I mean? Maybe you've never seen the Clone Wars, but like these things happen, and the things that happen there are important to the big story, you know?
Yeah.
Rebels is great.
Yeah, for me with Rebels, that separates it from Clone Wars for me is less serialized and more this one progressing narrative that I enjoy. Now, in terms of what we're doing today, we are going to be talking a lot about Dave Filoni, his potential future, what our thoughts are. We also are going to be doing Will of the Force, but before we do that, first off, you know, if you haven't listened or watched in a while, Lacey's sort of doing half time, sort of. I don't know, how do you say that? But she dialed back a little bit. Obviously, she's expecting her second child in a couple months, so she just needed to take more time to herself. And so me and James are going to be doing these Monday shows, but always hit Lacey up on social media at Lacey Gilleran. And for anyone who is just tuning in to TRB for the first time, thank you. But there's a lot of TRB going around. We do 2 episodes every week. We're going to be starting TRB live on Wednesdays. Usually it's Thursdays when there isn't a show. But James, we have a Star Wars show that's coming out on Wednesday. So we are doing Wednesday nights through the run of Ahsoka on TRB Live, which is 8:30 East, right here on the channel and on your podcast feeds Thursday morning. So make sure you're subscribed, whether that's here on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@theResistanceBroadcast, or your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Apple, what have you, so that you are always ready and not missing any of our episodes, because sometimes they connect quite a bit. And this past Thursday on TRB Live, we did our speculation and final predictions of what will happen in Ahsoka, and I forgot that the Darksaber got destroyed in Mando. So there's a lot to go over. So make sure you're subscribed, and thank you to everybody who listens. And as far as our support from Patreon, thank you to all of our patrons. If you like what we do here at TRB and want to support us, head to patreon.com/Resistance Broadcast. Tiers start at $5. And as you move up the ranks, there's more perks and rewards. We have a Discord server, a lot of exclusive content on there. We do live stuff, live Q&As. We do live hangouts, live meetings, a lot of cool fun stuff over there. So head to patreon.com/Resistance Broadcast and sign up and support us. Now, before we get to Will of the Force, we've been doing this like sort of abridged version of how we are handling coverage of things like Ahsoka. Bottom line is, we, of course, stand with the unions that are trying to get beyond antiquated contracts. And we hope everyone can get back to work and find an agreement so that everything can get back to being made and them making and writing and developing the things we love. But because of the fact that so much of the future of this saga, especially this connected storyline, will hinge upon the success of Ahsoka, we made the decision that we are going to cover Ahsoka, especially, it was made before all these strikes were happening. It means a lot to the future of the franchise. It means a lot to the existence of the franchise today. And of course, what's to come ahead well beyond when the strike ends. But we do certainly stand with those who are striking against the studios for good reason. But that is why we have chosen to cover Ahsoka. And we have full statements on that in our past few episodes. But James, we have a lot to talk about, although it's mainly about one thing. And of course, the man doing it, Dave Filoni. But let's kick things off. Let's warm up the engines here with our first segment.
All right.
I fear nothing, for all this, as the Force wills it.
That's right. It is time for Will of the Force, where we pose questions that ask whether something will or will not happen. Now, some of those questions come from our patrons, and this time in this segment, all of the questions are going to be about Ahsoka. As the series arrives with its first 2 episodes on Wednesday, let's get started with the first one here. This one coming from one of our commanders, Commander Ian Thompson. Commander Ian Thompson, you are on the show. The question they sent over was, will Ahsoka feature Plo Koon like the actual Plo Koon as either a Force ghost or in a flashback? Now, I'm curious to when this question was actually submitted, because we got that big Master and Apprentice mini documentary, 7 minutes long, where they discussed who is Ahsoka, where did they, not the character necessarily, but the character development. Where is this person coming from?
Yeah.
Dave talked a lot about how initially it was supposed to be Ahsoka and Plo Koon, and we know in canon those two are very connected, as Plo was sort of the one who discovered Ahsoka, and they have their own sort of connection. I don't, oh man, this one's tough, because I think this is the time to do it.
It is.
If Dave Filoni, who loves Plo Koon and who has on numerous occasions used him as sort of like, it's because it's his favorite Jedi and sort of this like hidden like little thing, this would be the sort of joke of like, and then Plo Koon.
A decoy too.
And that's what I'm saying is like, and everybody goes, oh, is that like Luke? And he's like, no, it's Plo Koon, And I seem to think we might be getting some flashbacks in Ahsoka anyway with Anakin based on his line. That's why, after all said and done, after all that big long explanation, I think there is a chance that in Ahsoka we will see a live action Plo Koon somewhere in a flashback of some sort. John, what do you think?
I'm sort of leaning in that direction too. I do not think Force Ghost. No. I think even they limit who can be Force Ghosts.
Wasn't in Rise of Skywalker. Get up, Rey.
Yeah, right. It would not shock me if Filoni found a way to get Plo Koon in the mix in a flashback. Now,
right.
I feel like because ever since they did that flashback, and I think the first flashback was in Last Jedi.
Oh, yeah, you're right. But I think like when we were really getting it in Mandalorian,
well, actually,
showing the
wrong.
Battle droids and stuff.
Force
Awakens with the thing, yeah.
With Rey as a kid. But anyway, sequel trilogy. Ever since we got flashbacks anyway, in canon Star Wars, it has really opened the floodgates on speculation. And I feel like everybody, and even including us on Thursday, are talking about what flashbacks we're going to get. And if they do a bunch, I think we'll get Plo Koon. If they only do a couple, I don't think so. But because Filoni likes him so much, and there has to be some level of uncertainty on, will I get to do this show again? Will I get the chance to do this? That might have creeped into his head where he's like, I got to get Plo Koon in here. I got to do my version of Plo Koon here. So I think yes on a flashback. Briefly, no, I don't think of any big thing.
Yeah. It's sort of like when we saw young Kanan in that Tales of the Jedi. It's like he's right there, and you got to stick him in there. What?
Bad Batch too.
Bad Batch too, but he like wrote him into that. It was the first time I think we saw him though was in the trailer or something for Tales of the Jedi, was it not? And he was like standing next to Depa Billaba, and everybody's like, "That's Kanan right there. There he is."
Oh, yeah, probably.
I feel like that was his first animated appearance, as we saw him and he didn't do anything. And then later in Bad Batch, we got him more. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. It's just a strange comp.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
Yeah, so we're both on the page that Plo shows up at some point in some type of flashback in the background. I don't think he'll have any lines or anything.
Thank you, Ian.
Right, yeah. All right, let's take another one here. Let's go with, will Tatooine be featured at all in Ahsoka? And I think this question is coming from just the sheer fact that we've gotten so much Tatooine recently.
A lot of Tatooine.
They're like, we already created the digital asset. We can just throw it on. John, do you think that a Tatooine will be featured at all in Ahsoka?
I'm going to say no, but when you think about, Tatooine is very relevant to Anakin's story, which in turn becomes sort of relevant to Ahsoka's story in a way. But I just don't think there's going to be any reason for it to show up. I don't know that we're going to get a young Anakin flashback or a flashback of him slaughtering the Tusken Raiders or anything like that. And I can't imagine Ahsoka having any reason to go there. And I'm trying to think of the other characters.
Pelimato.
What they would. Yeah. And I don't think Pelimato's shown up in this series. So I'm going to say no Tatooine. I'm going to say no Tatooine in Ahsoka.
I think my answer could be summed up, instead of saying no Tatooine, I'm going to say, I hope no Tatooine.
Yes.
I am sort of burnt out on it. It's fine that Mando went to Tatooine, but even that alone already sort of pulled away from when Rey got to go back to Tatooine at the end of Rise of Skywalker, because you see the Falcon fly over it and you go, I mean, who cares? We've been hanging out at Tatooine all month, with these Mandalorian episodes. And then we're like, okay, Tatooine again, though. That's fine. It wraps up okay, cool. And then Book of Boba Fett, he's like, I'm back on Tatooine. And I'm like, oh my gosh, seriously?
It's all Tatooine.
Get out of this place. Yeah. And I get it makes sense to some degree, but it is really frustrating when Mandalorian and Boba Fett and Rey, it's like, let's get off this planet. So while Anakin has the connection here, I think when we get Anakin, it's way more Coruscant related. And I would way rather see Coruscant, even though we're starting to get that in the shows too. I'd way rather see that than I would anything. But at this, I mean, where are they at? And when it's Christophsis, right? Is that the name of the planet?
In Clone Wars?
When we first meet Ahsoka and they do the thing. So if they take us to that moment in the show, that would be a cool backdrop that we never seen in live action before. And, we could show a little bit of a recreation of some of those scenes, not like in full effect, but I remember my master and it cuts to him and he is laughing and turning. And the first time I ever saw him was that, or something. Who knows? It could be cool, but that would be a good planet to have Anakin be on that's new to live action. So
yeah, that's cool. Well, and like Luke, it's so funny, that line from Luke in the very first Star Wars movie was, if there's a bright center of the universe, you're on the planet it's farthest from. And George Lucas is like, just kidding. Everything happens on Tatooine.
Yeah. But we're going to find out one day in a book that there's Tatooine is a nexus or something.
It used to be a water planet. Yeah.
Man. All right, let's get to another Patreon submission. This one is coming from one of our commanders, specifically Joey Saxon in this question.
Joey!
Commander Joey Sack wanted to know, will Ahsoka speak with Mon Mothma during the series? I'm going to go first on this one. Not hard no, but I'm very confident that the answer to this is no. It's not that I wouldn't want it, but I think based on the interviews that we've already gotten, she's not in it much. She has one scene, and that one scene has already been shown to us, and that one scene is with Hera. and it's over a projector
I
or hologram.
I agree with that, and also just the trend of Mon Mothma to this point, throughout Star Wars is never really around Jedi. And
That's a great point.
In Rogue One, she goes to Bail Organa and she says, "Your friend, the Jedi." In other words, like she almost doesn't even really know what they are.
The one who can get us stuff.
Yeah. Your friend, the Jedi.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. And then you just reminded me her statements about like I did one day on Ahsoka or something like that. And it seems like it's just going to be that thing to connect stuff and see. Let's check in where Mon Mothma is post Return of the Jedi.
Which, if you've forgotten or didn't know, we also, the reason that scene was important was because they showed Kaz's father in that scene as well too.
Yeah,
it was really cool to see some live action Resistance connections there too.
That's a good point.
That's the first live action Resistance character, if I'm not mistaken.
I would have to say, yeah.
I mean, not counting like a Poe Dameron or something.
No, right.
Obviously.
Kylo Ren, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a no. I think this is a no. Yeah, I think Hera's going to be the one, and she'll relay, what the formation of the New Republic thinks on this, and blah blah blah. Yeah.
Oh, I sort of take it back though. We did get 3 Resistance ships and voices in Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to go that route, yeah.
Yeah.
But technically live action, and I believe we even heard their voices over the comms and stuff. So, But hey, Joey, I hope that answers your question. And maybe it's a little bit disappointing, but I think that is just the reality of it. Ahsoka will probably not speak with Mon Mothma, in
Good
our
question,
opinion.
though. Yeah.
All right, one more question for Will of the Force. This one is, as is Star Wars tradition, will anyone lose a limb and survive in this season of Ahsoka? John, you get to go first on this one. What do you think?
I think it would be really cool if, and people are going to take this the wrong way, but if Ahsoka had to have a mechanical arm like Anakin did. Yeah, I think that'd be it'd be kind of cool. Like, she's fine, she'll be okay. Like, it happened to Luke too,
Yeah, it happens, and then you'll forget because she's just wearing a glove and reasons.
But she could also have that moment where she looks at it and you think the way Luke thought about his dad and stuff. I think that'd be cool. And Filoni likes those sort of motifs and callbacks and stuff. They're probably not going to do it, but just because I think it would be cool to see, as long as it's one of our heroes and they're okay. Or what if it happens to one of the bad guys, one of the villains? That could be cool too. I want to
discuss whether those villains are going to live, though.
I know. I kind of want to see it. So while it's probably unlikely, it's probably like 80-20 that they won't do this. I'm going to say yes. Let's go.
I'm saying no. I think that it's a good thing, but I think this tradition died a while ago. I think this tradition sort of went away because if you kind of consider who the last person to really lose their limb and survive was, I mean, there's probably other ones, but the only one I can think of is Dooku. Oh, he didn't survive even, but it was sort of like you watch the movie and you watch his limbs get cut off and you're like, oh, that's Star Wars for you. Yeah. Mace Windu, I guess, too, also lost a hand. So it's like, it's sort of Star Wars-y, but I feel like that tradition is sort of lost. It doesn't really ever happen in like Clone Wars or any other animated things. It hasn't happened in anything Mandalorian yet. I just think they've moved away from that. Yeah, I guess you could say that. But while I think that's interesting, I think that the mechanical arm on Ahsoka sort of goes against Ahsoka.
What about Ming-Na Wen? Her character.
Did she lose a limb?
Well, they had to replace her whole torso.
Well, there is that, but it's the same thing, but it's not the same thing. I don't feel like that's them being like, oh, we're going to do a twist on the classic thing. Instead of them losing a limb, they're going to lose.
Fennec Shand, sorta, and then like what was the?
I mean, when you look at the movies, man, it was like every other day. Like Anakin was like, lost a hand, lost a leg. You know, it's like it's ridiculous.
Cobb Vanth though, he may be a little messed up. Maybe he needs a little mechno arm.
I'm saying no.
All right, right on.
I'm going no on this one.
All right.
I don't even know who it would be. The only thought I can have is Sabine. Like maybe that's like a low moment in this series, and Ahsoka has to say, "Get back up," you know, or something. But we'll find out. Other than that, though, that's going to wrap up Will of the Force, and we can get into our discussion right now.
Obi-Wan once thought as you do.
All right, our discussion this week, as spoiled by the title of this podcast, Dave Filoni, heir to the Lucasfilm empire? So we just thought it would be cool to step back because everyone's talking about Ahsoka, and just talk about the man himself, Dave Filoni, the one who co-created Ahsoka with George Lucas. You know, he sort of had, as he said in that Master and Apprentice 7-minute featurette, which if any of you haven't watched that, definitely check that out on the Star Wars YouTube channel. But Filoni sort of talks about how him and Ahsoka had similar paths. He started as George's apprentice, and now look where he is. He's a creative executive on the board at Lucasfilm. He's now a director, a showrunner, and he's going to be directing a movie. Fingers crossed that still happens. Dave Filoni is...
Well, he's not going to put out a stinker before it.
Yeah, right.
Not a movie, at least. Yeah.
Right. So Dave Filoni is a lot of things for a lot of people. And obviously all those titles I just listed are his current roles for Lucasfilm. But bigger than that, you know, he is the connectivity, the closest level of creative connectivity to George Lucas, who has since handed off the reins over 10 years ago now. But he still checks in and sees, you know, visits the set and sees what Dave's up to. But also for fans, I think there's a certain level of respect and capital given to Dave Filoni that maybe other creators aren't given by fans to a certain perspective, because he is sort of the chosen one by George Lucas in a way. Like his son without being his son in a sense. And yeah. I don't think in this title, I mean like heir to the empire of Lucasfilm, that he's going to take over and be president. But in terms of from the creative perspective, is he the rightful heir to continue being the main tree from where these stories come from, the way George Lucas was? So to me, there's a lot of reasons why he should be that person. Because I can't think of any situation where there would be someone else who would leapfrog him as that person, unless he completely lost his way. And by all of the looks of it, it looks like he's just getting better and better with his skill sets and storytelling. Because if you look at, which may be on purpose, I don't know how you think about this, James, but even, you know, Clone Wars to Rebels, I think there was a step up there in certain perspectives on how to tell a connected narrative versus serialized stuff. And that was a lot of George Lucas. He liked doing those serialized storytelling. But also season 1 of Rebels compared to season 4, the maturation there. And even Dave Filoni spoke about maturation of his storytelling. So what do you think about this? You know, obviously you're a huge Dave Filoni fan, being that Rebels is your A1, you know, Star Wars story. Mm-hmm. Is Dave Filoni the heir to the future of Lucasfilm storytelling?
I mean, since your question says not necessarily being like the person who's going to run it all or anything like that, I think he already is. Mm-hmm. I think we're already at that point where when Ahsoka comes out, I know he's leading up to a movie, and in a lot of ways that movie is sort of like, well, that's a big one. But I feel like the fact that we've gotten our Solos, our Rogue Ones, we're going to get our origin story of the Force and all this, like or a Rey follow up. Like there's so many movies now. Movies just sort of feel like another part of the cogs that are Lucasfilm. They don't feel like that's the big thing. I feel like that's why right now, leading into Ahsoka, that this is sort of the official handing off of like everything that I've learned about Star Wars from George is leading to this moment. It's not leading to the movie. That the movie is the culmination of everything from this point forward, you know, or from like Mandalorian forward or whatever. That's something else. But Dave being given the opportunity to do this show is the beginning of, this is the new, or at least this is one of the paths that Lucasfilm is taking. And that's maybe one way to take this conversation, is that the heir to the Lucasfilm. So says Dave Filoni, he's the new George Lucas. He controls everything. I think that what they are doing is they're saying, you don't control everything, but if you are the type of person who was like a big George fan, you know, we are carving out a path for you. It's the Dave Filoni path. We are doing that story for you. We are still going to do our Deborah Chow Obi-Wans. We're still going to do our movies over here and our High Republic over here. You know, that stuff's not, that stuff's not being handled by Dave Filoni, but there is this very clear path that they're telling us. There's a reason that segment is called Master and Apprentice. They're saying, look, there was George handpicks Dave. Dave is the culmination of, you know, like what George, I don't know, man, it's all of his lessons and everything wrapped up into this. There's no other person, you said it yourself, that is going to like supersede him at that. They might be able to do other stories over here, and that could be really cool. We could get,
that's where,
you know, another world in the corner of Star Wars is the Rian Johnson world. Like maybe Ryan has his pocket over here that he's doing that or whatever. Dave doesn't control that, but we have a Dave led Star Wars.
Yeah, I agree, but I think
timeline or
there
whatever,
there is an additional, there are additional steps. He hasn't reached his summit yet, and I think what will be better understood is when Kathleen Kennedy moves on, because she was in place as president when Dave was still just developing animation, and he was the animation guy, and now she's still president, and now he's worked his way up to creative executive. And we have seen and heard on multiple instances that Kathleen Kennedy gives very strict or overpowering creative decisions on movies and what happens, and, you know, we're going to do this, we're not going to do this, obviously, this character is going to go this way, and, you know, all that stuff, even down to the, you know, music choices for like young Leia, so that we were told by Natalie Holt that Kathleen Kennedy sort of put her foot down on some things about that. So I think the better scope of this will be, you know, once, you know, if Kathleen Kennedy moves on, you know, whoever takes over as president of Lucasfilm, unless, you know, they umbrella it or whatever, but then you'll see what, like, once that happens, keep an eye on where Dave Filoni's at, and does he receive more creative control to the point where he becomes the George Lucas of creative, and the president handles the executive element of it, controlling the producers and the directors and all that stuff, and do like a two-headed monster sort of thing. Because George Lucas had his hand in everything in terms of his canon.
Was his company.
It was his company, but also from the creative element of it, like I was saying last week on, I believe, one of our episodes, that even though he didn't direct The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, he's all over those movies. He's like literally hands-on on the sets, making decisions and like guiding the directors and not stepping on their toes, but saying like, this is what I had in mind and that sort of thing. I could see that for Dave Filoni in the future. And it doesn't mean he's overriding what the directors are doing, but having a more active role in the future of the overall storytelling. I could absolutely see that, because he has really ascended in the last 5 years from being the animation director to now a creative executive, where, like we heard last summer, I believe it was either Puck News or Jeff Snyder, who have both been very right on a lot of these things, saying Dave Filoni was a part of that war room, talking about the future of the movies, including that Rey movie. And he previously had no tie with the Rey character at all.
Right.
As a matter of fact, his first time, being observing directing was when Rian Johnson invited him to the Last Jedi set, so he can like sort of see how Rian Johnson operated as a director. And I thought that's really cool. So I think there's more to Dave's journey in terms of his overall involvement in creative. And to me, it seems like the logical path to have him be a bigger presence, to not necessarily connect everything, but to make sure it has that Star Wars stamp of approval. Because like you said, the Master and Apprentice, Dave Filoni gets what George Lucas was looking for. And he knows the tendencies, and if anyone, like a lot of fans like to say, like George would do that, George would think this, George would think that. George Lucas is still alive, but he's not involved anymore. Dave Filoni is probably the person who, if he doesn't call up George Lucas, he probably has a very good idea of what George Lucas liked to do with Star Wars. And it doesn't mean Star Wars has to stay by always what George Lucas thought, but knowing that the person who invented this thing would want to steer in certain directions it's just logical for Dave Filoni, if that's his next step. In other words, I guess I'm saying, to put it shortly, I don't think him being creative executive and in that spot that he is now is his ceiling. I think there's another step for him to take.
Really? I don't know. I'm still sort of sold on what I was saying before, though. You didn't quite win me over. I think where your opinion on him not having that ceiling and being able to move up holds weight is the fact that he is currently he's in that creative executive spot. It sort of means that he has a little bit of pull on more than just what he's carving out. Mm-hmm. So that is a very good point. I'm not really sure, because we've had these discussions before. Sometimes it's really hard to tell who makes the decisions at Lucasfilm. Sometimes I think Kathleen Kennedy is overseeing it. Other times I think, well, there's Michelle Rejwan, she, live action development, or whatever, Not
anymore.
Not anymore, but you know what I mean? It's like, sometimes these like creative heads seem like they are probably the people who are like the top making the decisions for certain stuff. Then there's also like this other angle where they're like, we always let our directors and our storytellers dictate Star Wars canon, whatever they write, we just tell them if they can't do that because it's a contradiction or whatever. But if they want to add to it, we just let them do it. So it's like they're not even really controlling, or they don't really have the big picture sometimes. Sometimes it's really hard to figure out what they're doing. I think that one thing to note here is that Dave Filoni under Kathleen Kennedy is what he is, and we're seeing that grow and we're seeing that develop. If a new person comes in, another Bob, right, as the head of Lucasfilm instead of Disney this time, a new Bob. They come in and they say, we're switching things up. That James Mangold movie, it's done. We're not doing that. This show, we're not doing that.
Don't even put that out in the universe.
I'm just saying, for the sake of argument, man. I'm saying somebody comes in and they have control over the situation. They really shake things up. I think one of the biggest mistakes that they could make is to remove Dave Filoni from power.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Because
that would crater everything, dude.
That's what I'm saying. I think that even if a new person came in and they said, I'm getting rid of the Rey storyline, I don't think it worked. I'm not moving Lucasfilm in that direction. we're not going the James Mangold thing. I've got new plans. We're bringing in new directors. I think all that shakeup, fans could go, man, that's a bummer. But hey, I trust this person. Breathe new life into us. But the second he says we're squashing Dave Filoni's stuff, or we're removing him from power, we're degrading him, I don't have faith in that guy. I think that person immediately loses fans. That person whoever it is,
that situation doesn't exist on any timeline.
That's what I'm saying. So I think he has this very specific power that he holds sort of over any other creator, including Rian Johnson's and Ron Howard's and JJ,
including the president of the studio.
Yeah.
Dave Filoni he has the job security of weathermen. Like, weathermen can be wrong every day of the week, and they're still going to be there at 11 o'clock to tell you what the weather's going to be. No offense to any of our patrons or listeners who might be weathermen. But, my point is, Dave Filoni is not going anywhere. In any dream scenario that someone could cook up that Dave Filoni gets jettisoned from Lucasfilm, Star Wars will probably end that day, because even the most ardent of supporters of Lucasfilm, of Disney, whatever, there would be a mutiny. So that situation just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So
you know what? Like, let's. I know we're making it clear, but I feel like we need to make it even more clear. The headline, Dave Filoni fired, the clickbait, Dave Filoni fired, is the least believable thing I could ever see when I wake up in the morning and I open up X or whatever, and I see that somebody posts that. I just think Kathleen Kennedy fired or steps down or James Mangold movie not happening, Daisy Ridley not coming back.
Here's one that's more believable. Alec Guinness returns from the dead, will play Obi-Wan Kenobi, is more believable than Dave Filoni is fired from Lucasfilm.
It seems like he's sort of bulletproof, and I don't know if that is... I mean, even Jon Favreau stepping away from Star Wars seems more believable than Dave Filoni stepping away from Star Wars.
Jon Favreau will eventually step away from Star Wars. I mean, Dave Filoni, this is his career. This is his life. This is all he's known. And so then, in your opinion, what is the ceiling for him? Because you think there's this other position that is like the Johnny Ives to Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs runs the company, but Johnny Ives has so much power as a creative control of Apple. Of course, I'm not talking about currently. He doesn't even work for Apple anymore. But I think currently Dave Filoni is looked at as an advisor for projects he's not involved in, that he's not producing. I think he will likely show up on the set of the Mangold movie and be relied on heavily about thoughts on the Force and the creation of the Force. I think that's a no-brainer. So I think the next step for him, or maybe his like peak position, will be like head of I don't want to say head of creative, but something like that, because
that's where I get a little stumped on what his path is. And I'm like, I feel like they have multiple paths. One of them is a very Dave Filoni heavy thing. But at what point does he start to overlook over all of it? So I feel like that's pushing up against your president or your CEO.
You have your president who's there to make the final call on stuff, but all pitches and project suggestions and storyline paths and what to do about the Force and stuff have to go through Dave Filoni. I think that's what we're looking at in the future. I think that's the natural progression for me, because right now he, as a creative executive, he's one of many. But I don't see him flatlining his career here at that point. And like I said, I think we'll learn more, and it'll be more telling
Well,
once Kathleen Kennedy leaves, which I have to imagine would be after this contract ends, but that's been said before, so we really don't know. Bob Iger said the same thing, and he's apparently sticking around to the happiness or chagrin of whoever you are. But we know he's not going anywhere. He's already a creative executive and has vaulted to that position in just like 5 years. So I just don't think it ends there for him. So I think the natural progression is him becoming sort of the head of the creative side of things, and being like, everything has to land on his desk in order for him to be like giving the thumbs up or thumbs down to the president of the studio, saying like, we should be exploring this type of storytelling. We should not be exploring that type of storytelling. This works. This doesn't. We would have to tweak that. I like that as long as this happens. I could totally see him having that level of an executive position.
My thoughts on that is that Dave Filoni is a creative at heart. He's not just good at producing things on paper and like saying, this is where we're going to find our locations. This is how we're going to hire our actors. I think he wants to he wants to use his hands. Yeah. And I think right now him having done the animation, he was directing that. He was hands-on. Now he's moved up. His career has grown to a point where he's working in live action television. His next step, he's going to be working in live action movies. And then at that point, his next step is stepping away from that to head over everybody. No. So then what is he doing when he's this creative person that looks over all of it?
Well, George Lucas
he's
did the
still
same
making
thing.
Movies.
George Lucas did the same thing. He made the decisions on everything, including the, licensing to the toys and licensing out things to the EU and a lot of. I don't
think Dave wants that job. That doesn't feel like a.
But and maybe I'm getting wild on this, but it would not shock me at all if, say, another president comes into place at Lucasfilm. They become more of the behind the scenes, not public facing persona. And Dave Filoni is the one that goes out on stage at a celebration and lets people know what's coming in Star Wars. He becomes the face. And I think that's a smart move for many reasons. One,
I like that.
We've seen him at Celebration. He has people in the palm of his hand. He knows the pulse of fans. He knows how to get an ovation out of fans. He knows how to get a rise out of fans. He knows how to connect with the fans. He knows how to speak to the fans. I don't know that I could say that about Kathleen Kennedy.
Like if you got a private president or CEO or something like that, and they're like, hey, when we do these celebrations or when we do these big like announcements at D23, I don't want to go out there. I don't want to be the person. You need to be the person, because you can go out there and be like, hey, welcome to D23. Today we're going to be looking at the future of Star Wars.
Think about a lot of the recent celebrations.
But that still doesn't feel like his job.
Well, hang on, because and tell me if it's crazy, but I just think about how things are now. And my experience in seeing panels at celebrations, or even, things that have been broadcast or publicly released, Kathleen Kennedy clearly, reads what she has to read off the teleprompter in her presentations, whether they're prepared or they're live. And then she sort of walks off the stage, and then the creators take over. Dave Filoni, we've seen him several times clearly go off script, clearly get a little improvisational with how he's handling things on stage, and he's very good at it, and he's very good at talking about Star Wars. And I think it would be a smart decision on Disney's part, and whoever steps in at Lucasfilm, if they go the route of keeping a president of that studio, they may umbrella this thing.
Yeah,
that's a possibility. And say like, this is so smart from the perspective of fans. If Dave Filoni is talking to us and letting us know where we're headed and what we're doing, fans are going to give capital and credence to that more so than, the evil president who took this away from George Lucas. Like, I don't believe her, which is constantly happening. And even people who love this stuff, like I obviously have my criticisms.
Bob Flukas. Is this new person that
Well,
yeah, like the new?
But I guess what I'm saying, if they get an actual studio executive, because Kathleen Kennedy wasn't ever a studio executive, she was a producer and one of the greatest of all time. And then she becomes the president of the studio, and we see like a lot of the rocky roads that have been happening. If they get an actual studio executive in there,
which makes me feel similar to, which is why I'm fighting against it. You're not saying it either, but I'm saying I don't see producer Kathleen Kennedy being a studio executive was the best decision. I also don't see Dave Filoni as whatever he is, you know, as he's moving up to become the
head of creative,
the paper pusher, you know, like
I don't mean
sits behind a desk.
No, I don't mean that at all.
Well, that's how I think of Kathleen Kennedy. I don't think she's like getting her hands dirty.
I'm not saying Dave.
I know you're not saying that. I'm saying I just want to squash that I don't think we're leading to this point, which is why I think you're trying to create this other sub job. But every time you sort of create it, I still see it as someone who's not really getting their hands dirty, and they're sort of like just in control and a head consultant sort of thing.
I still think Dave Filoni will continue to create, and I would obviously this all hinges upon the success of what he's doing now, especially that movie. You know, if that movie becomes a big success, then I mean, the sky's the limit for him, and maybe he doesn't want to become like a head of creative.
Yeah, where does he move past that? Do another big movie and then a third big movie? You know, it feels like that's kind of plateauing.
I agree. So the only logical path
in
for me,
Star Wars, at least,
being that he keeps climbing that ladder, he seems to really be embracing that role. So as long as he's happy with it, I could see him still doing movies, a movie every 3 years, maybe being involved with something else on the TV side of things, but ultimately having a way larger role in the creative side of things. So I could see it two splits. You have the executive side and the creative side. And right now it seems to be very blurred because Kathleen Kennedy is very involved with decisions on creative stuff, not just green lighting things. Literally, we should change this scene to this. We saw Michelle Rejwan in the episode 9 documentary. Michelle Rejwan is talking about how they decided about Ben Solo's fate and all that stuff. So I think having the executives on one side and having the creatives on the other side working cohesively in terms of communication, but I can't see anyone better than, I mean, maybe like a Leland Shee or something, but than Dave Filoni, because he's still young, taking on that role at some point, just for so many reasons. One, obviously from the creative perspective, and two, like I said, it would carry so much weight with fans. And I think that's what that studio needs more than anything right now is trust with fans. And it could be that he doesn't want that. It just seems he's gotten this far, this fast in 5 years to be a creative executive at Lucasfilm from being the animation guy, that I can't see that stopping. And I just don't know what else is there beyond having more of a, I'm going to be overseeing I'm going to be the one saying, like, we should go forward with this movie. We shouldn't go forward with this. We should push this character. That character, maybe we take a little time out on, that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
and get him out there on the celebrations with his hat and be the guy, you know?
Yeah, I don't disagree. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give the boldest of predictions.
Oh, I like those.
I think that if I were Dave Filoni and I were in the position that I'm in right now, where it's sort of his, he's doing well. He knocked it out with this show. He knocked it out with that show. Now he's moving here. That's a big success. He's got his Ahsoka show. He's leading up to a movie. If those are good, then, he keeps moving up. I personally think that in his mind, there's another walk of life. There's another option. And I think he's already sketching in it. He's got his book. He's writing out his own world that is not Star Wars.
Ooh.
And I think that as he moves up as a creative, I think he could have the option to oversee Star Wars, but as a creative at that point, there's an argument to be made where he's like, I've conquered Star Wars.
It could be.
I did stories. I did animation. I brought live action. I did my own series. Ahsoka. What more? You know, I led all up this big culmination. I directed the movie. I did a Star Wars movie. What more do you want out of me? And I feel like as someone who could truly follow in the steps of George Lucas, he is probably right now and has been for a long time in his own mind developing a world that he could say, I'm stepping away from Star Wars. Here is my next path in life. And I hope that you follow me on that journey where he invites us to learn about these new worlds, these new characters, and he is the head of this new company where he does own the licenses to the toys and the marketing and everything. And he can control that just like George Lucas, but it's his. And that is the true succession of Star Wars. It's a bold thing, but
it is bold. It would
Lucasfilm will never fire. They can't fire. They could, but they can't fire, and they probably would never fire Dave Filoni.
Right.
But Dave Filoni can outgrow Lucasfilm if he really is that. If he really is that ambitious, I think he can get to that point where. That's why I said earlier, like, then what does he do? He makes a second successful movie and a third Star Wars movie and a fourth Star Wars movie. What is he doing?
Dave Filoni could create a world or franchise worth over $4 billion. That's saying a lot.
But he wouldn't. He would only like.
Because you said outgrow. That's a big word.
Right, as a creative.
What
I'm thinking
this?
like so. For instance, I'm trying to think. So,
by the way, that'd be catastrophic for Lucasfilm.
So, well, it could be down the line. I mean, he may leave us in a place where it's like, I've done so much for this company, and I feel like I've given you a lot of my knowledge that I had from George back into new apprentices and new people who can write and direct and do all this stuff with Star Wars. I feel like he has his own people that he's teaching as well.
What if he did it under Lucasfilm?
You know, that's also possible. That's a good point. But again,
that's up to Disney, though.
Not again. That's a good option. But that option comes with the caveat of he doesn't own it. But it would be a reasonable.
Now it's.
If he's been developing this other world and this other thing in his mind, does he want to sell that intellectual property to Lucasfilm and develop it under them? Or does he just want to walk away and be like, I'm starting my own company.
You know what, man?
I own the intellectual property now.
I mean, that's a good point. I never thought of about him doing that. And it would be very ambitious and
very George.
Yeah, it would be very George Lucas. But
I worked with the studios until I felt like I
never really
just wanted to do it myself.
I never really say this seriously, but I would love for Dave Filoni to, for whatever reason, find this episode and listen to it and be like, no, absolutely not. Or, yeah. And not about what you're saying, about any of the things we're saying, you know, like, because we don't know. It really comes down to what he wants, because I think we both agree, like, he's not going anywhere unless he wants to go somewhere. So, or he doesn't want to, you know, he can climb that ladder if he wants to climb that ladder, or he can just go back to doing animation if he wants to one day, you know. Maybe
I know you're a big James Cameron fan, but where does James Cameron go? You know, it's like, okay, Disney's giving him all the money in the world to make his movies, so maybe he doesn't have anywhere to go. But if he was ambitious, there is this other idea that he's like, I'm creating my own studio. I own it all. I front the money. I make all the money. And it's like James Cameron's legacy could be bigger than making movies for Disney or being the most successful director under Warner Brothers or whatever, you know?
That's, you know, James Cameron is around 70 now. So where was he, you know, 20 years ago? Because I believe Filoni's around 50, you know? I mean, Dave Filoni hasn't made a movie yet, so to compare him to James Cameron's tough. But,
right. No. But I'm just saying, when you get to that point where you feel like you're, I don't know, like where do you go? Like I feel like him continuing to make movies for Star Wars, it feels like a plateau to me. And
that would be it's a nice plateau to be on, though, isn't it? So there's some people who like doing that, taking a path and staying on that path, in life, and whether that's a day job and you get the job when you're 25 and you work till you're 65 and you retire and it's the same company and you've been there 40 years, or it's a movie director and you make your movies like Adam Sandler. He's been pretty much, in terms of the movies he makes, not necessarily the ones he's in, it's like the same type of Happy Madison stuff he's been doing for 30 years and he likes doing it.
Yeah. And he's in a better position now. That's more of like what I'm talking about with Dave Filoni at some point, where you're like, I'm tired of being in movies, or I want to own the company. I want to still be creative. I want to star in my own movies. I want to make them.
Dude,
but
I could see it. I could see that happening. I don't know that that's as bold of a prediction as you think. It just scares the bejeez out of me because I don't want him
for the sake of Star Wars.
I don't want him to leave. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But then again, I mean, I love Kathleen Kennedy and I love the era that she has, but it would be nice.
So much respect, for sure.
It would be nice to, at some point in our lives, look at like the Dave Filoni era from, all the way from Clone Wars to, wherever he ends up. And then to be like, and if he wouldn't have left, we never would have gotten, Flown Vatar or whatever, like he's working on Avatar, like, and then he moved into Star Wars and then he created his own thing. The true Filoni verse that is like, his own existing thing that could be huge. It could be like a Harry Potter level world of creation that they would market as like from the basic, like the heir of George Lucas, from the mind of George Lucas. They wouldn't say that, but you know what I mean? Like that, the whole pitch of like Star Wars was George and it carried on by this guy until he decided to do his own thing. So come and see his own thing, or whatever. It's
crazy to think about because I'm looking at his like whole filmography, and aside from Avatar: The Last Airbender,
it's only Star Wars.
It's been Star Wars, and it's a lot of Star Wars.
And at what point does a creative go, I feel like I've given everything that I can to Star Wars, and it's time for me to move on? And I don't mean that like trade up or get bigger than Lucasfilm, but at some point I could see a creative like that saying, I want my own world. George taught me more about Star Wars. He taught me a lot about Star Wars, but he also taught me about how to be a successful businessman and to leave a legacy.
Yeah, it's interesting. So right now his official title is executive producer / executive creative director. I mean, he's kind of like right there, and you're right. It's a matter of does he want it, or does he want to develop his own completely unique legacy? And he's going to turn 50 next June. So it's probably at that moment where it's like, if I'm going to do this, I got to do this now. It's interesting. And then that begs
Productions.
That begs my last question is, if he's like, I got to go, not saying they would be able to keep him, what would they offer him to get him to stay?
Well, I think that's the thing is they offer him what he doesn't want, and he has to make the hard decision. And he goes, I'm not ready for this, but I'm doing it because I'm leaving, I'm starting my own company, because the only place that I can grow in Lucasfilm is to positions that aren't necessarily things that I want to do for me.
Yeah. And let's say, which I hope this doesn't happen, of course, let's say Ahsoka falls on the lower tier of viewership, like Andor or something like that, and then his movie comes out and doesn't do well financially, Disney would be like, oh, you're going? All right, see ya. Like, they won't see the way we fans and maybe people inside Lucasfilm see his value. They'll just be like, this guy didn't make us money. Like,
we might think differently if he bombs on Ahsoka and the movie, though. I don't think he will, but again, in this scenario where,
yeah.
Well, I thought it was if those two things bombs, then Lucasfilm might let him go, and they
Okay,
hold on. Sorry.
No, I'm saying, say he's like, I want to try my own thing.
Yeah.
And Ahsoka comes out, doesn't do well ratings wise. His movie comes out, doesn't make money in the box office, and Disney, like Lucasfilm's like, man, we need, Dave's gonna leave, we got to get him back. They go to Disney. They're like, who? Dave Filoni? You mean the guy who just put out that movie that lost money and the guy who did that show? We're good there. And Lucasfilm can't be like, oh, well, too bad. Disney be like, no, we don't care. So
I gotcha. Disney pulling the strings instead of
him leaving or him staying, hinges. Oh, will always, because it's Disney owned, will always hinge upon the financial success.
Yeah,
so,
we're assuming the best for Dave because we have the faith that he could do it because he's knocked it out of the park with every other property leading up to it.
Even if we love, just like with Indiana Jones, just like with Solo, like
Willow,
I don't care about the financial success of the stuff. If it's good and I love it, I love it. So I think Ahsoka will be great. I assume he'll make a great Star Wars movie. Whether they do well, we'll see. A lot of factors go into play on that, but and
that's the age-old question of any creator. Like, they're gonna keep getting bigger until they release the movie that it's like, that was not good, and then it's just like they get bumped back a little bit because they just had a huge flop, and everybody thought they were like on top of the world.
I'm glad you
director, writer, anybody.
I'm glad you threw that hypothetical out there too, though, because I never thought of that. In my brain never separated Dave Filoni from Lucasfilm until just now. So that's interesting.
Hopefully a lot of our listeners, if that's the case for you, share this episode and say there are things that I never thought about in Star Wars
with the caveat
I listen to this
that
episode.
We don't want Dave to leave Star Wars.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Well, except for I would love the idea of this new awesome world. What if it's great? What if it's just this next awesome, cool thing that we would never get if he just stayed at Star Wars?
Do the next Willow. Do the next,
I was thinking
Indiana
the
Jones.
next Harry Potter, the next Hunger Games, the next, whatever the next big franchise is that just the Fast and Furious or whatever it is that somehow could be so cool and creative that it spawns books and movies and TV shows, and it all comes from, years later we'll look at it and be like, from the mind of Dave Filoni,
right?
Or whatever, and it's like that dude's a genius. He doesn't need to be, as much as we love him, as much as Star Wars loves him, and they're gaining from that success. There does come a point, and it could all be a failure too. It could be Michael Jordan saying, I'm bigger than basketball, and goes to play baseball, But it's like at some point when you have someone that's so talented, it almost feels unfortunate to have him handcuffed into just one series. Let him develop his own series and intellectual properties.
Yeah. And the happy medium for that hypothetical for fans would be like the glistening Lucasfilm logo, and then, Dave Filoni presents, and it's some new thing,
but that is an option as well.
Yeah. But that's again always going to be under the Disney umbrella.
Exactly. Yeah.
It takes a lot of
caveat
money
to that. It's a good opportunity, but he might not take it. Yeah.
It's hard to start new things these days when these studios are buying up all these IPs. So, but anyway,
this is like I was going to say, this is like a Shark Tank deal where it's like, I'll give you all this money, but I own 20% of your company, or whatever. And he's like having to make the hard decision of like, I could leave and develop something, and I'm taking a risk on it, but nobody owns, 51%, and it now belongs to me, and I could make all the profit.
Yeah.
I own it. That's my legacy. It's not Disney's legacy.
It's certainly interesting, and we touched on a lot of points and a lot of speculation on the path of Dave Filoni. So I don't have much else. I don't know if you have anything else before we get out of here.
No, I'm curious to what Lacey would think if you're as thrown as you are. I wonder if she has contemplated this, or what her position on where do people move up the ladder.
Right. Yeah. And our listeners, I'm curious where they lie on this. Like I would imagine a lot of them don't want Dave to go either, but there's a lot of different paths he can take. And I think he has a lot of the control over that.
Yeah.
But we'll
it's his
see.
to lose.
Yeah. But good discussion for sure. And I hope everyone enjoyed this episode. Thanks for listening and watching and being a part of TRB. It means a great deal to all of us. So keep spreading the word, share links. Tell your friends that we're going to be covering Ahsoka and going live this Wednesday. But ultimately, that if you know someone like Star Wars, tell them about the Resistance broadcast, because we always have a good time twice a week, and we like to invite more people into our Resistance base. So keep spreading the word. And a big thank you again, like at the top, to our patrons, patreon.com/resistance broadcast. Check it out. If you find a tier you like, they start at $5. Sign up, join us. It's a good time over there too. A lot of exclusive content, live stuff, awesome fun over there. And a big special shout out to our generals and spice runners: Carmelo, John RISI, JETTA Rosewater, Frank Grande, Darth Hurricane, Nick Kratz, Chris Morales, Brian Smith, Matt Chitty, Danny, Mike Ramori, Matt Heath, Brendan McLaughlin, Count Pepto, Sneaky Zebra, Aaron Ellington, Colin Cormier, Jolt and Jedi DiMaggio, Diana and Dave Hornack, and the Spice Runners: David Probus, Neil Shaw, Kendall Gelner, Andrew Staley, Jeremy Myers, Michael Fry, and the Fort Worthian. And everybody, thank you all so much. James, this was a good time. I am at Johnny Hoey on Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, and my movie podcast, Just Like the Movies. We're putting out an episode tomorrow, I believe, on Top Gun Maverick, our most recent movie to date. How about you, James?
Woo! I got. What did he say? Son, I've had jet fuel in my blood since I was born.
Yeah.
Whatever.
What a flick.
Yeah. You can find me on X and Instagram, both at Myra Trunks.
And as we said before, Lacey at Lacey Gilleran on all the platforms. And we'll be back. TRB live Wednesday night, 8:30, talking about the first 2 episodes of Ahsoka. So we know everyone's going to watch it. We hope you enjoy it. We hope it's good. And have a great start to your week. And we'll see you Wednesday night with another episode right here on TRB. See you around, kids.